Greetings sailors and welcome to a video on the second part of the Halloween operation, which is called Sunray in the Darkness. Now this is the new part for this year because previously with the Saving Transylvania we basically had a rerun of last year, but this year's follow-on is pretty much a direct follow-on because you are picking up immediately where the last one left off. So that was more of a refresher, but we also got some stuff out of it, of course, for getting the 5 stars. Now I'm going to start this off actually with a look at the captain skills, and then we'll dive into a bit of gameplay, because this one's definitely harder and a bit more complicated than the first part. And then I will discuss the fly in the ointment, because I have a problem with this. The actual operation itself is fine. It is pleasantly challenging, to the point where I still only have 4 stars. I haven't done 5 stars on either EU or NA yet, which I think you're going to need a group of people for. Doing it just with a random bunch of people, it's not impossible. I know people who have done that, but I haven't managed it myself. It just requires everybody to be pulling their weight. And so far, basically every single time, we've just had too many people that haven't been pulling their weight. And so the best that I've managed on both servers is 4 stars. So we'll start off with the Urashima, which is basically a Kagero. I mean, like the previous 3 ships, they are basically reskins this time round. It's tier 8s, which does actually mean there are far better financial and XP and elite captain XP rewards this time. So even if you aren't playing with a premium account, you can get away with using premium consumables, and you're not going to lose money as you did with Transylvania, which is that's a nice thing. It means that there's a lot more replayability to this, even just in terms of grinding out some credits and some XP. So anyway, what I've done is I have spec'd for stealth, which in retrospect I didn't really have to, torpedo reload, and also I've put on torpedo acceleration. So what I have is 4.8 kilometer 75 knot torpedoes, which have a reload of 38.3 seconds. Now in retrospect, I think Adrenaline Rush would have been more useful than having Concealment Expert, because my concealment is at this point 4 kilometers, which does include modules, because you can, like tier 9 and 10 ships, mount 6 different types of modules, including some very expensive ones, which will be demounted for free at the end. But yeah, you can sink a lot of credits into this mode. I think I spent like 10 to 12 million credits just putting the upgrades on each of these ships. So to get that 38.3, I also put on this, but I don't really I think the torpedo tubes on the Urashima have a lot of hit points, because I don't think I've ever had them knocked out. So I'm not even sure if having preventative maintenance was that useful. But yeah, I think I've had them criticaled a couple of times, but I've never had them outright destroyed. So otherwise, yeah, Jack of all trades, that's useful on all ships. We've got the usual last stand. Adrenaline Rush probably would be useful on all ships as well, actually. You know, going back, I would respec a few things, but unlike the previous op, we don't get the free resets. The free resets just happen to come along at the same time. So there's no experimenting, really. So ideally, I think I would have Adrenaline Rush maybe instead of Expert Marksman. I maybe would have not even bothered with it, Concealment Expert, and possibly have taken something else instead. I don't even know what I would have put those other points into. But for the Urashima, I don't think there really is anything on the 4th rank of captain skills that's that useful. EFT maybe, for the extra firing range for your guns, but really your guns are kind of incidental in the Urashima. It's all about the torpedoes, getting those torpedoes out as quickly as possible, and also making those torpedoes as hard to dodge as possible. Next, we have the redressed Chapayev, which is the Svyatozar something. I should call it the Chapayev. Why did they have to make it a name that's difficult to say? I don't know. Svyatozar, I think. Now this one, again, I wish I'd kind of spec'd it differently. The one skill I really wish I had is Expert Loader, because you will be swapping between HE and AP a lot. But otherwise, again, jack of all trades, expert marksman, which still leaves the turrets feeling a bit stiff, to be honest. Adrenaline rush probably would be useful. Superintendent is kind of a must on all of them. You really do need the extra charges of everything, and I highly recommend taking the premium consumables as well. And then lastly, I kind of, I've gone for IFHE, so the HE shells do a bit more damage, and you lose a little bit of fire chance, but even with IFHE, I still have, if I can bring up the, where are we, 45% fire chance. But the way that the fire chance is calculated, just even a couple of percent difference can actually make a difference. So demo expert might also be quite desirable. But with basic firing training and manual AA, I mean, I maybe could have gone AFT as well if I was going more into the AA spec. But there are guaranteed planes, but they're fairly weak planes, so there'll be a lot of them. But you can, even with the comparatively weak AA that this thing has, and no, it doesn't have defensive AA or anything like that, it still will shoot down some planes. So boosting that from 60 to 120 DPS, for instance, that is actually quite a big difference in terms of this operation. The Magnus, I completely spec for secondaries, which also has the added benefit with AFT of making your AA quite good. If you put manual AA on this, you could seriously make it good AA. So you could make this you could spec around AA, but I spec'd around secondaries, including the secondaries flag, because the secondaries are just useful the whole way through, and you can get quite a lot of bonus damage from both the secondary hits and the fires set by those secondaries. And actually, talking about fire set by secondaries, Demo Expert possibly would have been quite useful, because if I look at the fire chance on these secondaries, it's just the regular German secondaries fire chance. It's not like they have an ultra high fire chance, so actually a couple of percent extra fire chance would probably be quite useful over the course of this. That probably would translate into tens of thousands of damage. But it's possible to do 1 million plus damage in this mode. There are a lot of hit points floating around, so again, this is not perfect. This could possibly be better, but I found of all of the ones that I've done, I'm most happy with this setup, but it still could maybe be tweaked a little bit. Lastly, the carrier, the Nobilium. I struggled to spend all the points on this one because I went for the obvious skills and then I went for some non-obvious skills just to use up the rest of the points. So, aircraft servicing expert, jack of all trades again, high alert, just because I had the points left over essentially. I could have gone for torpedo acceleration, but they're already quite fast torpedoes on these planes. If I can bring up the Torp bombers, 53 knots. It feels relatively fast. The auto drop on this is pretty good because it's just anybody's going to play this. I've noticed the queues for carriers have been consistently large. You might get 2 or 3 people waiting for each other class of ship and then 30 people queuing up in carriers. The downside of that is that you get a lot of people in the carriers that have no idea what they're doing, and even though it's really quite kind in terms of making auto drops, people are still being really terrible. I've seen people sailing into the mist, into the filth as it's called. I've seen people driving all the way into the corner, and so the carrier turnaround is really long, and people just not using their abilities is the main thing. I can count, it's probably in maybe 1 in 10, 2 in 10 games that I've played where I'm not in a carrier, I'm not in the Nobilium myself, where people have actually used their abilities, their consumables. So if you're playing the Nobilium, for the love of God, use your consumables, because they really make a difference. They really do. And if you're going to have a successful 4 or 5 star run, you have to have a competent carrier player as part of that. And if you don't, then you're going to manage 2 or 3 stars at best. So that's enough yattering about crew skills. Let's actually jump into some gameplay. So for this first replay, and this is from a replay, hence why it says Tirpitz rather than Magnus, I have decided to show a bit more of it to basically give you an idea of how the whole thing plays out, and then I've got selections of subsequent games in the different other ships. Now it's 7 per side again, and as I said, well, you start off pretty much where the last one finished off. So you actually have the Transylvania coming through the portal from the previous scenario, accompanied by, well, one of each. It's not the 7 AI ships, but it's one of each. It's one of the Igor, the other ones, the Blades, the Vakatake. I can't remember what the one is. The Nassau is, what was it? I can't even remember the names. It's been like, a week and a bit, and it's all gone already. But anyway, yeah, you start off with the Zikasas following in at the heels of your allies, and they're not very difficult to dispose of. But not too long after that, well, you start to get the proper enemies arriving. So that's one of the Vegas there, the Bismarck. And this is me using my area heal ability. Now, this is important. The reason I picked out this particular replay, I've done multiple playthroughs with each class of ship. And I think I've won more often than not, but usually it's 2 or 3 star, because 4 stars alone is quite difficult. And I think, as I've said, I have not managed 5 stars at all. But the important thing to note when you're playing the Magnus is that the heal is not just for you, it's an area heal, it's for your allies as well. And so I picked this one out because it's not the best damage, it's not the best result I had, but it's one where I was particularly able to use the heal for my allies. In fact, I barely had to use it for myself in this one, but I was able to keep multiple allies alive, especially the Urashimas, which don't have their own self-heal. They can heal when they're in the Filth, as it's called, but otherwise, unlike all of the other classes, they don't have any way to heal themselves directly, because with the Chapayev you can do damage to actually get your own health back. In this you can just trigger that area heal. The carrier has a team heal, and for the destroyer, well, yeah, it's pretty tricky, because either you go off in your own in the Filth to try and get some hit points back, which is actually incredibly risky to do, but also can be rewarding. But yeah, if you're not nearby an allied battleship that's willing to use their heal for you, you very rapidly get into trouble. So I see those two are in trouble again, so I'm going to pop my heal again very soon. But this is the loss of the first tower. There are 3 of these towers which are trying to close the portal and stop this wave of filth coming in. And the first one, well, you saw there is a spawn of enemies actually outside the filth. That, I think, is one of only 2 spawns outside the filth that can happen. And so it seems pretty predestined. I had one round where we actually managed to kill things quick enough to stop that tower being destroyed until well after the filth had actually enveloped it, but for the most part, no, it's pretty inevitable. Even then, even when we were killing things, it still eventually got destroyed, because we couldn't hang around in the filth, because the filth saps away your health, and it is a percentage-based thing. So it seems to hit the higher hit point ships a lot harder than the lower hit point ships. So there's the secondaries opening up at 6 kilometers. I've already got several hundred secondary hits. This is the value of the secondaries right here, having the BFT alone. It's not a huge increase in the rate of fire, but over the course of the entire scenario, yeah, I think it is worthwhile just being able to pew out as many. Did I actually pick BFT, having said that? I've almost immediately forgotten whether I did actually pick BFT or not. Anyway, but it's still a pretty good rate of fire without, and the effects are very nice. The actual ship designs themselves look pretty good. The Wargaming have certainly outdone themselves in that regard. And of course, one of the rewards potentially for this is that you can get randomly these skins for the regular counterparts. But we'll cover that at the end. That is kind of the fly in the ointment. That's the whole the disappointing thing about this. That's the part where Wargaming has gone a bit skeevy. So the Gorgons turned up. The Rasputin... Did we take care of the Rasputin already? I'm not sure. But yeah, there's 2 boss enemies. There's the Gorgon, which is a Shikaku, which spams a lot of tier 6 planes at you. Well, actually, no, the dive bombers are a tier 8. The torp bombers are tier 6. So they're relatively easy to shoot down, but they are incredibly numerous. And I'm pretty sure I get double-digit plane kills by the end of this fairly easily. Well, obviously double digits not that impressive. It just means you've got 10 or more. But I'm thinking, you know, like at least 2 or 3 dozen plane kills, and it's not that difficult just with the sheer number of planes you get. So we've got one of our Urashimas that's actually trying to get to the carrier in the Filth, which seems to be one of the primary roles of that thing. It is one of the more difficult classes to play. This, in contrast, you know, the Magnus I would say is actually probably the easiest to play. And it's the most survivable. It's also, you know, it's like the tank and the team healer all in one package. So you're trying to stay near your allies, essentially. You're obviously trying to do damage yourself, but in this particular round, I really didn't do that much damage overall. One of the games you'll see in this, like, I had nearly 1 million damage. In any of the other classes, I think the best result I had was about 700,000 in a Magnus, but you could probably quite easily do that in the Chapayev as well. So we're approaching the second tower. This, I would say, overall, in fact, the second tower's about to get blown up. This is the hardest condition to meet. I've had a couple of rounds where we did save the second tower, and if the second tower, like, you basically have to hold them back long enough for the second tower to help close the portal, because if that tower gets destroyed, it then takes longer to close the portal. So you have to basically slow them down enough. And that's where the carrier ability to immobilize enemies and to silence their guns comes in particularly useful. But carriers never ever seem to use it. You know, as I said, there's maybe 1 in 10 games where the carriers actually bothered to use their abilities. This was not one of them. And it almost became a drinking game of, oh, is the carrier going to use their ability? Nope, okay, take a shot. And, you know, it got to a point when I'd maybe, you know, I've done a couple of days where I've tried multiple hour sessions of this, where the alcohol actually might have helped dealing with some of the people that have also been trying to play this mode and haven't been playing very well. So, yeah, but it's more of a shock and surprise when you get a carrier player that is actually using their abilities. We've had some, though. I mean, I've had some that have been terrible. I've had people and carriers that just be AFK. And it's particularly the carriers. I don't know why. But, yeah, or people just charging into the Filth. Although I must admit, I accidentally did that once myself. Because I thought I was clicking on planes. Only with the wonderful carrier UI, I'd accidentally, like, it hadn't registered that I you know, pressed a key to change to a plane group, and so it still thought I wanted to send my carrier that way. And by the time I noticed, I was halfway there, and by the time I got turned around again, I basically had to use all my heals on myself just to stay alive. But conversely, that was one of the better games I had for damage in the carrier, just because the turnaround on the planes was then very, very short. But it was at the expense of most of my hit points, so that was a pretty big goof on my part. So we're approaching the third portal. For some reason in the replays, the actual timer is completely balked. But yeah, we're basically trying to keep them back at this point. So you saw me there use my shield ability. I'm actually going to have a little clip after this one's finished, because we're nearly done with this, where I use the shield ability, the invulnerability shield, to successfully ram somebody. But it doesn't stop you from taking fires or floodings. Those can still happen. So it will stop the direct damage, but it will not stop either of those 2 status effects. So that was a 3-star, because we didn't get the Gorgon or save 2 towers, but we did all the rest. And here we go. This is a different one, where this is a completely viable tactic, but you can get a bit carried away with this, and you might end up getting yourself stuck in a bad position. But in this case here, yeah, I've just triggered it, and I'm just going to casually boop this enemy battleship, which of course got me a flooding, but it's fine. So on to the Chapayev. We're just going to call it the Chapayev. And this one is more about setting fires, but you can also do some pretty decent direct damage with the guns. Now, the consumables in this case, I mean, previously it was a team heal, and all of them ramp up with the damage that you do. The first threshold is generally 100,000, and then I think it's 200 and then 400,000. So the healing circle and the amount that you can heal in the Magnus gets bigger with the higher amount of damage that you get. And in this, it's the self-heal, the T ability. So when you activate that, your rate of fire vastly increases. You can heal yourself, and the amount that you can heal yourself is tied to the amount of damage that you've done. Your team ability in this case, however, is radar, which has enough range to, well, it's 15 kilometers. That you can actually see the dotted outer circle on the minimap. That is your radar range. The default cooldown for that is 45 seconds, but you can actually, well, that with the premium consumable, but Jack of all trades, of course, can bring that down a little bit. So here we see, yeah, using the I don't even know what you would call that ability, but the self-heal anyway. And yeah, oh, that hurt. Yeah, the Rasputin still hurts. You can use that to get a lot of health back quickly, but you know, if you hang on to them for later on, I mean, I kind of balanced it between using it to do a lot of damage and then saving it for those periods when I needed to heal, when there wasn't anywhere nearby, or where the battleships were just never using the heals except selfishly. One of the struggles with this class, though, was remembering to keep an eye on that radar cooldown, because you might as well just keep using it, essentially, because there's no other way to see in the muck. The visibility is extremely limited. So there's another use of it. Earlier on, I went down to very low health indeed, and actually did get an allied battleship helping to heal me, and was then able to get the remainder myself. And once again, this is a battleship that's triggered to heal, and our other battleships actually just sailed out of it, but I think they've got their own healing going. So there we go. Yeah, you can see the overlapping circles. So that's the Great Gorgon, by the way, which sometimes comes out of the smoke, the filth, but it tends to be towards the end, as we are here. And in this case, well, I can't remember if it's this one or if it's a later one, but it was just a bit too close to the end to actually tackle it. But the reason why this ship and the Hiroshima are particularly useful for dealing with the Gorgon and the Rasputin is they have a lot of hit points, and so those damage ticks hurt it a lot. If you set multiple fires, you're going to rack up a butt ton of damage against the two bosses. So setting fires on the normal enemies is fine. Using AP, you know, firing AP against broadside enemy cruisers kills them super quickly. You also get bigger AP volleys than HE volleys against the battleships. So I found that setting fires, there we go, this one we did actually take down the Gorgon, and I ended up being the last one. That's what this, I've had so many replays to go through, it's difficult remembering which one's which. But yeah, what I was doing was trying to set fires, and then if they were giving me a broadside, I would fire AP volleys, because the HE volleys were typically between 3,000 and 4,000. The AP volleys you could get 5,000 to 6,000 against the broadside battleships. So in terms of the raw damage output, you know, obviously one's better than the other, but if you've got the ticking fire going at the same time, well, that's also good. You've also got the Chapayev's 4-kilometer torpedoes. But as with the Magnu-s, I found they got knocked out a lot, even with the skill that helps you out. So they are useful at times because a lot of it's very close quarters, but if you're counting on torpedoes, yeah, it's more about the guns with those two. The Hiroshima, on the other hand, is all about the torpedoes, but the guns are okay as well. The main purpose, I think, of the Hiroshima, unlike the other ships, is specifically to take down the bosses, because the Hiroshima, as I think mentioned, has this ability to go in the smoke. It's a speed boost that heals you while you're in the muck. Now, of course, in the Magnu-s, you can also heal yourself whilst in the muck, but it's a heal in spite of being in the muck. This heals you because you're in the muck. You also get the ability, the consumable that stops people firing at you with their main guns, but no, that doesn't stop their secondaries firing at you, importantly. And then lastly, you get a torpedo reload booster, which again is particularly useful for dealing with those bosses, because the torps do a pretty decent amount of damage, but once you stack flooding on top of that as well, it can take down even the very high hit point enemies relatively quickly. And I want you to pay attention to the damage as we're going through this one. I mean, this is skipped on a bit. We're up to 150k so far, which is not that good overall. But this was me specifically trying to go into the muck and take out the Gorgon. Now, the reason why this is particularly difficult is because, well, if you get caught between the cooldown on your abilities, you can be in trouble. But also, you need your allied carrier to be using its abilities for you to successfully do this. And this is why I think this is the hardest, because doing this with a random carrier player that just isn't using their abilities at all, which it feels like 9 times out of 10 they don't, you're screwed. You basically have to stick with the pack. You maybe have to play like the Destroyers were playing in that first Magnu-s game, where one of them actually did try and go into the Filth, but they didn't successfully manage to take out the Great Gorgon. Now, the Great Gorgon will pop out at the end, and it's possible to kill the Great Gorgon when it pops out at the end, but the safer option, as it were, is to try and get it before that point. I thought it was a game where we didn't actually get the Great Gorgon in time, but no, it's going to be the final replay where we don't actually get the Great Gorgon quite in time in the Nobilium. So this is all incredibly risky. I've got my ability on, I can't remember if I'm using it now or if it's on cooldown at the moment, but doing the broadside passes around the carrier is ouchy, and all the time you've got planes trying to drop on you. Now, this is where the carrier using their immobilization ability would be incredibly useful, because it stops the enemy's secondaries. Your own ability to stop people firing at you is useless at this point. So you really do need your carrier's immobilization skill, and also if they have heals available in between your own ability to heal whilst in the Filth, that can be a lifesaver as well. So we're getting all of the torp hits, but I mean, we went into this with what, 150, 160-ish K damage? Now over 500,000 damage. Look how many hit points this thing has. So if I can get some fires going as well, that would be great. But the rate of fire, I mean, the Japanese destroyer guns essentially, so the rate of fire is not that good. You are more relying on your quick torpedo turnaround. I'm seriously running out of health at this point, though. I absolutely need the carrier to help. And so far there's no sign that they are going to. But fortunately for me, this is one of those rare times where even though the carrier had not used their ability at all up until this point, they finally did. So there's the immobilization, and well, I'm actually losing hit points at the moment, but they are going to use their heal as well. Now, my own speed boost has just come back also, so I'll have that ability just as soon as I realise I have that ability. But yeah, this is that absolutely, like that space, even just using that once, the time that brought me to get out that extra wave of torpedoes and once again get behind the Gorgon has kept me alive. So there we go, I've used my own speed boost. I think I was wrong about the carrier using their heal, actually. I think it was just the speed boost heal and me healing my own hit points back, which at this point it's a fairly substantial heal because now we're over 850,000 damage and the Gorgon is still flooding. And although it's risky being this close to the Gorgon, it also makes the Gorgon's own drops a lot harder because it's not going to drop on itself if it can help it. So once again, a broadside pass, but the Gorgon is nearly dead at this point. But yeah, those secondaries really do hurt. So, unless you have a carrier that uses their abilities, this is incredibly hard to do, or else you have to wait for the Gorgon to pop out at the end. But theoretically, you can do this in Hiroshima, and there we go. We actually did this just before the end anyway. Most people had died at that point, but it was still a 4-star. We didn't kill enough people. We actually saved 2 towers that time, but we didn't kill enough people actually in the Filth to get that 5th condition. So that was one of the harder secondaries to do, to get that condition of saving both the towers. But then we didn't kill enough things actually inside the cloud of Filth. Lastly, the carrier. And I don't know why this is causing people such problems, because the auto drops are comparatively easy to use. The dive bomber drops are very, very tight indeed. The planes massively, the fighters rather, massively outclass the enemy planes once those turns up. Although the Gorgon's AA is very difficult. The reason why you don't go after the Gorgon in the carrier is that it's really hard to do. It seems to get a very long duration defensive fire essentially, and it seems to have very good AA itself. So if you put your planes near the Gorgon, you're just going to lose them. Otherwise, the next best AA is the Varig, or the, how do you say that? Again, it's a German battleship, so it's got good base AA, but you get a lot of replacements. The enemy, the Gorgon, can put out just a lot of planes and obviously has a lot of replacements. You yourself just have a lot of replacements. I think this is otherwise... well, you don't get 3 torpedo bomber squadrons on a Lexington, but I think this is, in terms of the number of squadrons you can put out, this is about what a tier 9 or 10 carrier would get. So I don't know. I don't know what the difficulty is in people using their abilities. Maybe they just get so focused on what they're doing with the planes that they forget to use the abilities. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it is going to be people jumping into carriers that have never played a carrier before, and, here's an opportunity to try out a high-tier carrier for free, which is fine. But they're then playing very badly and being a detriment to the team as a result, and it's almost impossible. In fact, I think it is actually impossible to get a 5-star if your carrier is not competent and using their abilities. I mean, for myself, I was doing... I'm not the world's best carrier player by any means. I'm very far from being the world's best carrier player. Outside of the Filth, I was able to reasonably competently make manual drops. But actually, inside the Filth, you can't see the UI elements well enough. So you pretty much have to do auto drops unless you're like a really confident carrier player and you can just guess how far ahead things are. You can barely see the silhouettes in the Filth of the ships themselves, and you cannot see the drop indicator at all. So it is pure guesswork. Of course, you can stop using that ability the enemy ships and actually do it that way, but yeah, that's you've got a limited number of uses on that, and I tended to use that more for my allies. Now, I've already used one of the heals you saw there. By this point I've done some damage, so actually there we go. I've managed to heal that Urashima, who was critically low on health. Yes, they're inside the healing aura of that Magnus, but they were pretty in pretty dire straits themselves anyway, so yeah, I have tended to use the heals and try to keep an eye out for people in that kind of situation. But the thing is, even when I've said, yell if you need a heal or whatever, I've only got a limited number. The problem, as ever, when you're trying to communicate with people, especially on the EU server, is everybody's speaking different languages. So people might not necessarily know what you're doing. You also saw at the very start, the path that I plotted, you want to stay basically just ahead of your main group. I've seen people run all the way to the 10 line or the A line. That's way too far. Where I am right now, which is maybe like a kilometre ahead of the main group, I'm like about a map square ahead basically. That's more than far enough. They're not firing at me. They don't fire at you unless you are the closest thing, essentially. But I've seen people, and it beggars belief, just charging straight into the Filth, and everything targets them, and they're getting the health stat from the Filth. And I've seen that multiple times, and I still don't get why people are doing that. But yeah, and I've seen people not use a single ability to the point where, as I've said, it's almost like you can make a drinking game out of it. So yeah, it seems like the best way to get a competent carrier player in this is to play it yourself, essentially. Not even competent, just paying attention to your teammates and trying to use your abilities, and trying to help the team and not just solely focusing on the planes. Now, actually, talking of not being selfish, I should have been using a heal here, and I am. Like, this is maybe... I'm willing to cut some amount of slack here because... yeah, there we go. I finally noticed that Urashima's on very, very low health, I think. Yeah, there can be a lot going on, and if you're trying to coordinate multiple drops, even if you're just doing auto drops, it can be easy to lose track of what's going on. So, just, like... pay attention is what I'm saying in the carrier. Do not neglect your abilities, and just try and keep track of what's going on all around you, because otherwise, yeah, you're going to be rapidly stuffed. So this is the one the Great Gorgon popped out at the end, and I'm actually trying to drop on it, and as you can see, we're getting defensive AA spreads there, and I'd actually triggered it earlier with dive bombers, but it seemed to last for a pretty long duration. So, yeah, attacking the Gorgon with your own planes is actually pretty difficult, mostly because of the defensive. So we almost killed the Gorgon in that one. That was almost a 4-star, but as it was, it wasn't. So, yeah, we actually had because I recorded this one live, the results screens. And as you can see, the amount of XP and credits you get is not bad. It's worth playing this over and over just to, grind some elite XP, especially if you get the captain dailies, especially if you have some flags. So, having said all that, having enjoyed the operation itself, even if playing with a group of random people can be pretty frustrating, I have a problem with the thing as a whole, and the problem is to do with the rewards. Now, as I've touched on, you can get the skins from crate drops, basically. You get special Halloween crates, one each for each star. So it's not camos and premium consumables and cash as we've had with previous operations, or a day of premium for getting 5 stars. No, it's one of these special crates for each star, and the special crates have quite a high chance of dropping one of the skins. Now, I managed to get this one, which fortunately was for a ship I do actually own, but on NA, where I got one for the Charles Martel, well, I don't own that ship, and I don't particularly want that skin. And the problem is, well, outside of the 5 stars giving you 5 crates, if you want more crates, you're going to have to fork over money. And this is not good. This is particularly greedy and exploitative, because up until now, in these campaigns or whatever where we've had special crates, I mean, you can go and buy Yamamoto crates, we've had Christmas crates, we had Dunkirk crates. You could buy them to speed up the process, so you didn't have to play over and over again to get collectibles for the Dunkirk campaign, for example. You could buy crates. But this time round, there is no other way to get these skins other than the crates. You can't buy them directly. The one exception is the Rasputin skin, which they sold for 4,000 doubloons, which I did not get because I thought that was a stupid amount of money to spend on a tier 4 ship skin. I just inherently think that the premium camos are too expensive in this game anyway. I think they should just do a flat reduction of 50% across the board. And I would have bought so many more if that were true. But otherwise, it's a random drop. And if you don't get that one that you want from those 5 crates, you're going to have to pay money. And the reason that is greedy and exploitative is because there's no repeatable mission, there's no anything. There's no alternative route. And there's no guarantee that you'll get the skin you want. You just have to keep buying crate after crate after crate and hope that you get that skin. And if you're after all of them, I don't even know how many crates it's going to take. But £10 for 5 crates. What have we got? £38 for 25 crates, and then I can spend £76 for 55 crates. And my response to that is to reach for one of those very rarely used expletives. Wargaming, you can fuck right off. Because this is exactly the kind of greedy, exploitative shit that we see in mobile games, that we see other unscrupulous publishers using. And up until now, Warships has been relatively free of that. We've had issues in the past with Wargaming making anti-consumer moves. The big one was when they were putting everything into bundles and ramping up the prices to ridiculous degrees with stuff that people just did not want. And Wargaming eventually backed down from that. But doing this, locking these things, giving you a little taste with those 5 crates that you can potentially get for free. And then that's it. If there was a daily repeatable mission that got you a crate, for example, then I'd be like, okay, sure. Over the course of this event, you can potentially get enough crates. You get the 5 crates, and then you can grind the daily missions. You can get more crates. Eventually, you get the skins that you want. There's enough time to do that. But that's just not the case. It's straight up. You get those 5 crates. You get your little taste, and then you're going to have to fork out quite a lot of money for each crate. No, just no, Wargaming, no. Absolutely, you're getting a rap on the knuckles from me from that. And I would highly encourage people to not buy the crates, no matter how much you want the skins, because Wargaming does not deserve your money for this kind of behaviour. This is absolutely not to be rewarded. This is, if Wargaming was a dog right now, I wouldn't be giving it a treat. I would be giving it a smack over the nose with a rolled up newspaper, and also probably telling it to fuck off, as I have just done. So yeah, that has annoyed me. That has really annoyed me, and it has marred what has otherwise been a really nice event. And I think it's sad that we have to end on this note, but here we are. Wargaming has made this bed, and I will absolutely call them out on the something. I don't know where I'm going with that analogy. I was trying to fit something in. I'm going to call them out with the sloppiness of how they've
tucked down the sheets, or I don't know. Anyway, no, you can't really force that analogy to fit that. But anyway, Wargaming have, they've screwed up from a consumer point of view. And they do not deserve to have your money for this, because, no, it's greedy and exploitative as fuck. So, sour note aside, hopefully you found this guide useful. And if you have, you can leave any comments below. You can hit the like button. You can sub to my channel if you haven't already. And, as always, stay tuned for more.